Omar. Thanks very much for coming, everyone. Thanks for inviting me back, Omar. It's always a pleasure to come and speak to you all. Although most of this material is kind of new, I am sort of pulling in a couple of bits from other presentations. For those that are not sort of familiar with me, my background is in software engineering. I did a degree in computer science and physics. I currently work part-time for the Open University doing student assessments and a bit of tuition in basically an IT module, which is called TM129. And I've got all the information on my website about that and other things and all the stuff that I've sort of put together. So you can go and look at that in your own time. I'll start off with a video clip here, and this will serve as sort of a bit of an introduction, hopefully. This works.
Say, pal, did I overhear you say you got a friend that's missing?
Well, I doubt he's missing. He's just not around.
Oh, yeah, well, I've been reading in the World Weekly News, you know, just a little while ago. There was a guy out here on the street he's found wandering around, didn't know who he was, didn't know where he came from, anything like that. Oh, he's perfectly healthy, but he's complete amnesiac, you know. A lot of people like that found just wandering around lately. You know, no history, no nothing. It's weird, huh? You know about the suppressed transmission, of course. No? Ah, well. This is the 20th anniversary of the moonwalk, you know, and way back there when they given us that one giant step for mankind bit, oh, yeah. Another astronaut's in the background yelling his fool head off saying, oh, my God, what's that over in the crater? What the hell is that? Well, NASA cuts him off just like that. But those of us with the right kind of radios, you know what I mean? Yeah, we got enough of it. The gist of it, there's a giant spacecraft over in the other crater. Looking at them. That's right. Oh, it all begins to leak out then that the space program is just one giant big cover-up. You know, it's a covert operation between the United States government and the Soviet Union. It's been going on for over 30 years. We've been on the moon since the 50s. You want to know how we got there, right? I'll tell you. Anti-grav drive. Anti-gravity technology. We stole it from the Nazis after the end of World War II. It's perfectly obvious. I was watching this Late Show. A lot of truth in the Late Show. You know, they slip it through there. They figure nobody's watching. But anyway, it's a sci-fi movie called Alternative 3. And it's about kidnapping people, using a little psychosurgery on them, you know, and turn them into zombies and making them colonize the moon and Mars. Funny, huh? Except it's absolutely true. All of it. We've been on Mars since '62. It was May 22nd. That's a very important date for you to remember, pal.
Yeah, it's my birthday.
Right, so, see, the reason we're up there covertly is because of the greenhouse effect. It all ties in. Yeah, greenhouse effect, you know. By the way, they discovered that in the 40s. You can ask yourself what they've been doing, sitting on their ass for 49 years, huh? While we're out here with some serious social diseases and everything else. Well, never mind that. But everybody says, oh, greenhouse effect 100 years from now. Nah, I'll be long dead, gone, out of here. Not so, my friend, not so. No, government's setting on the fact that it's 10 to 20 years maximum. It's getting hotter, don't you think? Yeah, it's not even summer yet. Yeah, when the polar ice caps begin to melt, it's not going to take a certified genius to understand we're in serious global confusion. I mean, really, we're in massive mainline ecological chaos. Anyway, it's happening even as we speak. So, I'll tell you what they've already done. They've colonized outer space. Oh, they couldn't colonize everybody. No. That'd be global bankruptcy. And they couldn't beat the greenhouse effect anyway. This secret group, you know, the group that's in charge of the government. Oh, yeah. They're going to get boosted off this rock before it melts. And the rest of us, what do they care? We're going to be left here to fry. By the way, something you should know. See, this entire operation is being funded by the profits from the metal on drug cartel. And that's specifically set up by the CIA to handle large sums of money being funneled into this project. Keep it on your hat. Yeah, but the people they need, like scientists, you heard about that? All the missing scientists around the world and those that mysteriously dying. That's all part of the recruiting process. I really hope your friend is not, well, yeah, they need a lot of lackeys to do the labor, though. So they'll be looking for ordinary guys. You know, just like you and me.
So, that was kind of a typical clip that you might see in a popular film. It was actually an independent film. It wasn't a Hollywood film. Somebody sent me that in the last couple of months, and I thought it was quite appropriate because it talks about, you know, anti-gravity drive being, you know, perfected and so on. So was it just a side interest of the scriptwriters, or did they actually speak to people that knew stuff? And I think there's some truth in what that character in that film actually was saying there. The film itself follows a set of characters. It's like just a random set of conversations set in Austin, Texas. You know, and it's just like one conversation into the next. There's no plot or anything like that. So, is there a secret space program? If such a secret space travel technology really does exist, could they have used it to get to the moon? Here is some discussion of the things related to what could be a secret space program.
Now, the only real clue I have, given that most of the reports of UFOs, or at least a lot of them, come from America, is this document here, which is the annually published list of defense spending put out by the Pentagon. Inside this document is every single conceivable item of military equipment that America is likely to buy for its armed forces. But if you add up all the line items inside this budget book and you subtract their total from the annual published total of $250 billion that the Pentagon reports to Congress, you find that there's a mismatch of about $30 billion. Now, this is what we call the black budget, or America's billion-dollar secret, which is reserved for deeply classified programs.
A lot of people talk about conspiracies over a shadow government. I'm willing to testify before Congress that these black operations do exist. I nearly became part of it. But I saw the light, I think. Or was it? And I got out. And that's it. We have to disclose what we know. And I am willing to testify before Congress under oath, or before any other organization, that what I witnessed was true.
This colonel is a real warrior type guy, and he had a degree in plasma physics. And he was also a consultant to NASA, and he was a consultant to people out at the Palos Verdes nuclear power generating station just 50 miles west of Phoenix. The other thing he said was there was a base on the moon. I find that quite astounding. I mean, I have heard astounding things, not only from this colonel, okay, but also probably the highest rank was a retired 3-star general, lieutenant general in the Air Force. And he knew another guy that I was in contact with, and this other guy claims that he worked 7 years on the U.S. anti-gravity program. And if a fraction of what he told me, and I've got a tape recorded, is true, whoa, what a sham the space program is. Because there's another space program going on, a secret space program. But the kind of space program he was talking about is using a spacecraft that can leave the bounds of our atmosphere and travel to the planet Mars at 0.8 c, 0.8 the speed of light. And I said, how do you know that? I've been there, he said. This man who told me this, by the way, verified he is an aerospace engineer. I cannot verify that he's also a physicist except by his writings, and I have some of his papers. And he claimed to work shoulder to shoulder with a race of human-like beings just like us. I forgot where he said they were from, if it really matters, and he worked in underground facilities at Nevada Test Site, China 8, Edwards Air Force Base, maybe other places. He said that he had been on this craft, had gone to Mars, and I asked him, where did you go? Where did you land? And he said, we went underground on Mars. And there was a base there where they landed. And he would not describe the base, who put it there, or whether it was our base. Nothing. He shut up about that.
But Edgar Fouché's credentials as an Air Force avionics specialist do qualify him with the exact sort of background to have been assigned to Area 51.
I was there to repair and do a couple of modifications. And I went up every day at 4:30 in the morning before sunlight, came back every night after dark, and did this for 10 days straight.
There are rumors that the Aurora project is responsible for many UFO sightings in the vicinity of Area 51. Ball-shaped craft and strange hovering lights. There are those who believe that Aurora has produced a revolutionary breakthrough in advanced technology. Edgar Fouché thinks he knows what it is.
To me, the most fascinating vehicle from the Aurora program has been the TR-3B. It's a triangular-shaped vehicle that uses a circular accelerator, as you imagine a circle within a triangle, that rotates a mercury-based plasma at 60,000 revolutions per minute, pressurized at 250,000 atmospheres, and supercooled to 150 degrees Kelvin. I absolutely believe that all the triangular-shaped vehicles that have been spotted belong to the U.S. government. The only thing that could outmaneuver a TR-3B would be the things we copied it from, which would be alien vehicles.
There is no evidence that his TR-3B aircraft exists. Except that in recent years, unidentified triangular craft with a pulsating light in the center have been seen in various locations around the world.
So, can you tell me what else you found? Because I know that you have something, has some information in regard to non-terrestrial officers. Is that right?
Yeah, there was an Excel spreadsheet, and the title was non-terrestrial officers. Then it had names, ranks. Wasn't a long list. Didn't even fill the whole screen, I think.
Well, could you just generally say how many? I mean, if you were to guess, are we talking 20, 50?
20.
Uh-huh.
Maybe 30.
First names and last names?
Definitely ranks, but no, nothing to say, you know, Army captain or Navy captain or...
So the designation wasn't there as far as which organization they worked for. Huh.
So, I mean, that was entitled non-terrestrial officers, and obviously it's not little green men, so I was thinking, you know, what force is this? And that phrase is nowhere to be found on the web or in official Army documentation or anything. And the other thing was a list of ship-to-ship and fleet-to-fleet transfers. You know, bear in mind fleet-to-fleet, so multiple ships, of materials. And these ships weren't, you know, US Navy ships. Again, I don't remember any of the names. But I remember at the time looking and trying to match up the names, and there wasn't anything that matched. I mean, I gleaned from that information, I surmised that an off-planet sort of space marines is being formed. And if you actually look at DARPA, Defence Advanced Research and Projects Agency literature at the moment in the last few years, and a lot of the government space command stuff, it's all about space dominance. You know, it really is, you know, the final frontier. So I think, yeah, it's natural for them to want to control space and be developing a space going forward in secret.
So what I tried to do there was just give you what I think might be some glimpses into what is the secret space program that have come up over the last few years. And I have to say that in that compilation that I made there is information and there is disinformation, which I'm going to try and cover as I go through all my slides here. And we're going to go into detail on, well, really this draws on or follows on from two presentations that I've done. They're on my website. The first one being the case for anti-gravity. I've got just one or two slides from that, and I first put that together 10 years ago now, and then I updated it in 2010. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit more about Apollo, and I put together a presentation which I did on Richard Hall's program, or some of it. We talked about that, called Removing Truth's Protective Layers, and I found a little bit of new information since I did that, so I'll include that. So we're going to review the conclusions from those and then consider rumoured secret space programs and two examples of secret space programs in the 1970s and 1980s, which I only became aware of recently. We're going to consider the progress in manned space program since Apollo. And we're going to look at Edgar Fouché and the TR-3B. I've got some more information on that. And as I said, disinformation regarding the secret space program. I've got examples of that. We'll talk about sightings of flying triangles a little bit, and some night vision sightings of craft as well, which I think are worth looking at. For example, by Ed Grimsley. I've got a couple of clips of that, and there are other people that have done that as well. So, what might be the foundations of a secret space program? Well, again, I covered this in the Case for Anti-Gravity presentation, and you've only got to look into the research of Nikola Tesla and Thomas Townsend Brown, and you're going back, well, sort of 90 years almost 100 years perhaps. Townsend Brown was doing work in the 20s. Also, there's the work of Victor Schauberger with his repulsine, where he was able to create a device which had a water vortex in it, and he said that was able to levitate. And I think that Nikola Tesla's research has been developed in black programs, and they've made it into something. I don't know exactly what. And there was also, for example, Project Winterhaven, which I'm not going to talk about in detail, but you can download the documents for that, which I think were either released or leaked or declassified a few years ago. It's fairly interesting reading. Not a lot that's in there, but there's some interesting morsels. There was also this talk of the German research regarding this Bell device. Now, I've got a clip here which I think I'm going to play next, which will cover some of this. But basically, it was alleged to be a secret Nazi sort of development program where they were trying to develop some type of anti-gravity device, or even allegedly some time machine. And it was Nick Cook that really sort of put this to a wider audience, and he mentioned it in his book, The Hunt for Zero Point. And he's a former editor of Jay's Defence Weekly. You saw him in the first clip there at the beginning. And he tried to investigate what he thought might be an anti-gravity program which had gone underground in the 50s. And he tried to contact somebody called George S. Trimble, who had worked in the field of anti-gravity research in the 50s. And Cook continued the research over 10 years, and it became the book, The Hunt for Zero Point, which itself is now, I think, almost, it's over 10 years old. I think it was released in 2000, so even that book is old now. And then we've had people like Joseph Farrell, but I don't really believe everything he writes.
About the 1950s research in the US was that just about every aerospace company you've ever heard of was involved in the field. In 1955, a range of companies like Lockheed, Convair, Bell, these big names from the US aerospace industry from the time, we're all talking about, this coming revolution, the anti-gravity revolution, and that all they needed was some input from the US government in terms of support and funding, and they could crack the science. And to me, what was intriguing was that there was an echo here of what was happening, or what had been happening, in the pre-Second World War years with fission, with atomic science, where the community was very much divided. You had those saying that if you split an atom, you could get an enormous release of energy, enough perhaps to make a bomb, and those within the field, physicists working within the field, who said it's absolutely impossible. And of course, in the mid-1950s, where these guys were talking about anti-gravity research in the same light, the community was riven with the same kind of dissents, those who said it was possible and those who said it was impossible. So there is this kind of intriguing echo, and again, that gave me some confidence that it was worth pursuing, because we know now the terrible consequences of the atomic bomb.
And one of the figures that he came across, I'll just mention this briefly, and this is covered in more detail in other books as well, was Hans Kemmler. And he was allegedly the head of this sort of ring-fenced Nazi secret weapons and secret development program. And Nick Cook basically says that nobody really knows what happened to Kemmler. There were 4 accounts of his death, none of which would stand up to scrutiny. So, where did this guy go? Where did the technology, that if he was involved in developing such technology, where did that go? And again, you can find stuff on the internet. I don't really know how much to believe of it, that the Nazis developed these sources. That this is obviously an alleged photograph. I think some of these obviously clearly fakes, but I don't know quite what to make of how far that development ever got. There doesn't seem to be a lot of high quality information. Nick Cook was a driving force behind a documentary in 2005 about UFO research, and that was called UFO's Secret Evidence. And I've got a clip of this here.
These are the Sudeten Mountains on the Polish-Czech border. During World War II, this beautiful valley was home to some of the finest scientific minds of the Third Reich. It was here that the Nazis built one of their underground research facilities, the Wenceslas mine. A vast underground complex hidden away from Allied bombs, which Nazi slave labour carved out of the Sudeten Mountains.
Example of a surface infrastructure being kind of a reflection of the underground facility.
It was here, in the desperate last months of the war, that German scientists worked around the clock to produce Kriegensscheiden, the war-winning technology that might produce a stunning knockout blow, even as the Nazis were being pushed back towards Germany.
We're now deep into the mountain.
Not hundreds of meters, but several kilometers, in fact.
This is several kilometers into the mountain.
Yes.
And this would have been a highly secure, impenetrable assembly site.
Exactly, and the secrecy around this place was very exceptional, so that the Allies never found out about it.
But the Allies did capture one man who knew all about this place, and he wasn't a token find. His name was SS General Jakob Sporenberg, and he was in charge of the technical program at the mine. What he revealed astonished his interrogators. Indeed, I find it astonishing 60 years later. He spoke of a secret experiment attempting nothing less than to conquer gravity. He described a bell-shaped device that needed enormous amounts of electrical power. It was made of a hard, heavy metal and filled with a mercury-like substance that was violet in colour and glowed when under test. People who worked on the bell suffered from sleep problems and severe vertigo. 5 of the 7 scientists died while working on the project. In a memo to Hitler, the scientists wrote, "It is in our opinion that the scientific results ascertained from our experiments with the bell are truly decisive for the war." Experiments with the bell happened deep underground in the mine, but directly above it, on the surface, was this strange structure. Called the flytrap, it first showed up on an Allied aerial reconnaissance photo in 1944. Igor Witkowski believes that the flytrap was a test rig for advanced propulsion technology. In other words, flying saucers.
There is a extremely strong and thick steel reinforcement of the pillars, which means that it was to withstand some great forces working on it.
How did it work? We don't know exactly, but we do know from Sporenberg's evidence that the bell was a revolutionary device, and the flytrap, designed as its test rig, was fed with underground cables running to the heart of the structure. Is it possible that the UFO sightings over Nazi Germany were related to this quest?
There is a sense here that the Germans were engaged in very highly classified work, and that possibly they were engaged in anti-gravity type programs.
What I do know is that many of these bizarre projects like the Bell did not remain in German hands. At the end of the war, they were plundered secretly by the American High Command and taken to the States.
Nick Cook, former aerospace editor of Jane's Defence Weekly and author of The Hunt for 0 Point. He had also visited that hillside in Poland where I'd been some weeks earlier, and I decided to compare notes. I asked him, what did he make of the Bell?
It was beguiling but perplexing, because there was certainly surface evidence to show that something very secret had been going on at this mine, and possibly it was the Bell. But on the other hand, there was no actual proof, to my mind, that the Bell project was what Igor and other people subsequently have said it was, which was some kind of anti-gravity device.
And what of the henge, that strange concrete ring, according to Igor, a test bed for some exotic craft?
The henge is definitely a kind of intriguing and very imposing structure, and when I first came across it on a sort of dark autumnal evening, lit by the headlights of our car as we approached it, it does create a very strong impression. The problem is that, again, it might look like the test rig for some form of very powerful engine, but it also looks like the base structure of a cooling tower.
A cooling tower for a power station.
So, personally, I think Nick Cook was warned off, because he was putting out quite a lot of information which could, lead people to getting a better handle on what has become the secret space program. So, and you could clearly hear they'd edited that clip. If you hit, it's not got time to play it again, but they actually edited it to say there was no proof of whatever he said before it. So, do we trust the BBC? Well, okay. So we're now going to look at the public space program. Now, the last alleged manned moon landing took place in 1972, and the Space Shuttle program ran for 30 years, but ended in July 2011. The maximum distance the shuttle reached from the Earth was about 375 miles during STS-82, according to the information I was able to find. Unmanned space probes have visited all planets in the solar system except Pluto, which of course is no longer a planet, so you could say it has visited all the planets in the solar system. And also, some people don't know that the USSR also had a space shuttle program which was called the Buran, and after one unmanned orbital flight in 1988, the Buran landed automatically and flawlessly, and it never flew again. So just think about that for a minute. Think about the progress in manned spaceflight and what happened since Apollo. Now, I documented a number of problems with the Apollo moon landings in this Apollo Removed Intrusive Protective Layers I've already referred to. I'll summarise some of those. The lunar rover battery could not have operated according to their specification. It was the operating temperature was way too low for the temperature on the moon. Cameras were not special, and neither was a film. So how did they survive the heat and the radiation on the moon, which was quite intense? The Charlie Duke photo on the moon, this one, how can that have been like that? Because the moment you put a photograph at 100 degrees centigrade, which is the temperature of the surface of the moon, it will curl up. It will curl up. But yet that is on NASA's Apollo record website. There is no way that photo could, that's a photo he took up there and put it on the surface as a memento. It's not one that, is meant to have come from a camera. Michael Collins did not see stars, according to his testimony at the press conference after the Apollo mission. Some of the Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter images, which Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter was sent up in 2009, this is an example of the first Lunar Reconnaissance image of the Apollo 11 landing site. That's meant to be the Lunar Excursion Module, according to NASA. If you measure that image, it's 3 times too big, according to the measurements I made. And again, you just got to listen to what the astronauts say. It doesn't add up. A lot of it does not add up. Just go and listen to it. Now I've come across another lie by Buzz Aldrin, which I'm going to show you now.
Mr. Aldrin, I always wanted to ask you this. We saw the photos of the little Masonic flag to the moon and some of the names of the missions and the numerology. Is there anything to that, or what is the Masonic influence? We know there's a Masonic influence in the founding of the country. What is the Masonic influence on NASA?
As far as I can tell, zero. There were some Masonic brothers of mine in Texas that wanted me to take some kind of a Masonic emblem to the moon in some gesture of, I don't know what it would be a gesture of, but I told them that it was not within my my authority to do such a thing.
In that clip there, you heard him say it, he didn't take any Masonic emblem to the moon. This is a letter. I'll see if I've got the appropriate bit. And he says, "It was a great moment in my life to be so cordially welcomed to the house, the temple of the to the house of the temple on September the 16th, 1969. I think I'm just see if I can get the larger version of the text. Yeah. My greatest pleasure, however, was to be able to present to you on this occasion the Scottish Rite flag which I carried on the Apollo 11 flight to the moon, emblazoned in colour with the Scottish Rite double-headed eagle, the Blue Lodge emblem, and the Sovereign Grand Commander's insignia." So either he took it or he didn't. If you look into Aldrin, you'll see that he's a liar, and he's made tens of thousands of dollars from his alleged trip to the moon. So, again, you can do some more research onto that if you want. So, yeah, Edgar Mitchell, he worked for the CIA. Anybody realise that? He worked for the CIA. He threatened Bruce De Palma over the N machine, said that he'd get his head blown off if he kept on working on it, which was a free energy device. And Mitchell lived near Roswell, New Mexico. And apparently he knew many of the witnesses to Roswell. He couldn't remember what it felt like to walk on the moon. He said that in an interview in about 1996. Again, I've got that in the other presentation. And when Bart Sabel did kind of an ambush interview with him and then left the house, Mitchell's son suggested that Bart Sabel should be waxed for doing this interview. And here is Mitchell in an interesting documentary which I recommend you look online, which is about Uri Geller, because Mitchell was connected to Uri Geller. He says he didn't know SRI was doing work for the CIA. Then he says, "I was called by the head of the CIA."
I was interested in telepathy, psychokinesis, and mental phenomenon and so forth. An American physician by the name of Andrea Puharich called me after I came back from the moon and said, "I found this rather amazing Israeli young man who can do these sorts of things. Would you like to study him?" And I was intrigued, and I told him, "Yes, bring him to the States and let's take a look." And then I set out to arrange the testing that we did with him at the Stanford Research Institute, where I met Hal Puthoff and Russell Targ. What I did not know at the time was that the work at SRI was also being funded by our CIA, and only discovered that later. As we finished our work with Uri at SRI, I was called by the head of the CIA and asked to come to Washington and brief him on what we had learned. And that head happened to be George H.W. Bush. He was head of the CIA at that point in time, and it turned out that it was all a part of the same big study. The Russians were studying it, we were studying it, the CIA was studying it, I was studying it, and so it was all a part of the so-called study of parapsychology. I didn't know at that time all work that CIA was involved in.
So do you believe him when he says he didn't know it was CIA work, when he had to go and then brief the head of the CIA? Do you believe that? particularly when his son said about Sabrell, should we call the CIA and get him waxed? That guy's connected to the CIA. This is all part of managing the secrecy. On the 100th anniversary of powered flight, warmonger George Bush announced the President's Commission on Moon, Mars and beyond. In meetings and hearings in 2004, Pete Aldridge and General Tom Stafford, former astronaut, talked of missions to Mars using nuclear thermal propulsion and ion propulsion, with trips at times as short as 60 days. I've got these video clips, but very hard to get hold of now. Also, General Les Lyles, at the bottom here, I'm sorry if I'm standing in the way, and General Tom Stafford agreed that the US Air Force does have a lot of technology. However, nothing has come of this Commission's report, and Obama killed it off. He killed off that whole program. Even when it was current, the goal was to return to the moon by 2020. That was 16 years after the date of the Commission. So when they set up this Commission in 2004 and did all these reports, they weren't going to return to the moon until 2020. Yet Kennedy said in 61 or 62? Was it 63? I can't even remember. But within a decade, they were allegedly on the moon. So how come it's, with all the advances in computer technology, materials, they were going to be there 16 years later? Does not make any sense. Okay, Obama.
By doing that, we will ramp up robotic exploration of the solar system, including a probe of the sun's atmosphere.
Watch where he touches his nose.
New scouting missions to Mars and other destinations, and an advanced telescope to follow Hubble, allowing us to peer deeper into the universe than ever before. We will increase Earth-based observation to improve our understanding of our climate and our world. Science that will garner tangible benefits, helping us to protect our environment for future generations. And we will extend the life of the International Space Station, likely by more than 5 years, while actually using it for its intended purpose, conducting advanced research that can help improve the daily lives of people here on Earth, as well as testing and improving upon our capabilities in space. This includes technologies like more efficient life support systems that will help reduce the cost of future missions. And in order to reach the space station, we will work with a growing array of private companies competing to make getting to space easier and more affordable. We will build on the good work already done on the Orion crew capsule. I've directed Charlie Bolden to immediately begin developing a rescue vehicle using this technology, so we are not forced to rely on foreign providers if it becomes necessary to quickly bring our people home from the internet. And this Orion effort will be part of the technological foundation for advanced spacecraft to be used in future deep space missions. In fact, Orion will be ready for flight right here in this room. Now, I understand that some believe that we should attempt a return to the surface of the moon first, as previously planned. But I just have to say, pretty bluntly here, we've been there before. Buzz has been there. There's a lot more of space to explore and a lot more to learn when we do. So I believe it's more important to ramp up our capabilities to reach and operate at a series of increasingly demanding targets while advancing our technological capabilities with each step forward. And that's what this strategy does. And that's how we will ensure that our leadership in space is even stronger in this new century than it was in the last.
So he says we're going to ramp up robotic exploration of the solar system, so that's not a manned space program. We're not going to go to the moon, because apparently Buzz has already been there, and he touched his nose just before saying that. If you listen to the... yeah. It's a sign that you're worried, you're stressed. We will not only look at revising or modifying older models. If you watch Richard Hall's version of this clip, it's funnier than mine because he's put some good captions on it. And for those that went to his presentation a few weeks ago, we want to look at new designs, new materials, new technologies that will transform not just where we can go, but what we can do when we get there. It's all like all this sort of, management talk. There's no real definite statements in there. There's no real commitments. So I'd say my summary of the public space program is The Apollo record is not clean. I don't think they landed men on the moon with Apollo rockets. They may have gone by some other method, but they didn't go in Apollo rockets. No way. Apollo astronauts have either lied about certain things, and Mitchell has shown himself to be connected to the CIA on multiple occasions, if you look. There's been no significant development of the manned space program since Apollo. It's actually gone backwards. There's no US manned space program now, and hasn't been for several years. So I think the public space program is just a distraction for covert operations. That's all it is. It soaks up all those, physicists and all the good minds. They all think the only alternative is chemical rockets and that sort of technology. And all of their expertise is devoted to solving those problems. And outside of that, there is a lot of other stuff going on. So I'm now just going to look at some of the rumours and stories of a secret space program that some of you might have come across, or that if you did, went away and looked, you'd probably find some of these rumours. There's quite a few. I haven't tried to cover all of them, but these are just some that I already knew about, or I've come across while just putting this together to add a little bit more information. So a number of rumoured programs have been talked about over the years, even going as far back as an alleged landings on the moon by the Vril Society in 1942. That's about the earliest one you'll find, I think. Joanne Richards and Mark Richards in 2009 talk about an alliance with reptilians, alien moon bases, etc., but there's no evidence of that. I looked on her website recently and I've got an interview from Veritas show with her, which I listened to just as I was putting this together. But when you listen to it, there's really not a lot of verifiable information there. It's all sort of just interesting sounding stuff with nothing you can really grasp onto. And then, of course, you may have heard of this in 2006, this Project Serpo, which was a hoax involving Richard Doty, the well-known UFO disinformation agent, and Bill Ryan, who went on to do Project Camelot, which has been a very, very mixed bag of stuff. Very mixed bag, and I could talk a bit more about them, but I won't. And then we've had Andrew Basiago here with his Project Pegasus, this Mars jump gate missions, and this story got embellished over a couple of years. If you listen to him, it sounds very convincing. He's got a very detailed story, and it sounds very plausible in the way that he tells it. But he doesn't have really any evidence. He doesn't have any video. He doesn't have any corroborating witnesses. He claims that Obama was there on Mars with him at one point. A bit more interesting is Bill Uhouse from the Disclosure Project. He worked with the J-Rod alien and developed propulsion and so on. He has quite an interesting account. Again, not a lot of evidence there, but that is probably, to me, is a little bit more compelling than some of the other ones. And then, as mentioned in the Slacker clip, we've got this story of Alternative 3, which was where they was allegedly taking these scientists away, taking them to underground bases and so on, or flying them off the planet. Is that true? Well, I don't know. But it's interesting that it was mentioned in that Slacker clip. And the treatment of that documentary was rather odd. But it could just have been another, dollop of disinformation to keep people away from the real program, which we're going to try to get to bits of as we go through this. And then one fairly interesting story, which I read a bit on, and there's quite a lot of information of this. It was in about year 2000. The Mars Records documents were released, and some photos of the scars of the person who said he was involved. A detailed record of recorded experiences had been written out by Stephanie Relf, which had been obtained through using kinesiology techniques. In other words, it's sort of like regression, not exactly regression. He was put into a very relaxed state and then asked questions. Now, this has been criticised because it uses a device similar to that used by the Scientologists. And she does mention that, though, to her credit, in the introduction of this document, which you can download for free. And there's some references to like Jesus and Christ, because this guy was allegedly, under a lot of negative, evil influences, and so he prayed to Jesus and all this. I don't really like that part of it. But if you actually sort of ignore that for a bit and look at the information, what he comes out with is very interesting. And then, of course, people like John Lear, they've made a lot of claims about secret space program. For example, he's talked about the space shuttle it has 72 hours of idle time because it docks with a secret space station before going to ISS. That's what he said. And again, there apparently is some slack time on some of the space shuttle missions. But he's also talked about bases and mining operations on the moon, which I haven't myself managed to find convincing evidence for, really. Not the mining operations. If pushed, I would say there probably is a base on the moon. which I'll mention in a minute. In 2014, we had the story of Captain K, which came out from the Earth Defence Force, and this was even published in the online Daily Mirror. I don't know if it was published in the print edition as well. Corroborated evidence for these accounts is rather thin, though. None of them seem to corroborate with each other very well, if at all. But I haven't really seen what I would call a convincing, verifiable photos of structures on the moon, for example. I've not really seen that. Some people will claim that there are there, but I'm not totally convinced. But just to mention a bit more on this Mars records briefly, in December 1996 I began doing one-on-one clearing sessions in Australia with an American man in his early 40s, Michael. I am an Australian. I had known Michael for a year prior to this. His life prior to 1995 had been spent in the USA. During these sessions we came to discover a vast number of astounding things that he had done, and which had been done to him, of which he had been totally unaware. These things included having worked on Mars for the US government, remote viewing, time travel, age regression by 20 years, being given false memories to cover his time on Mars, abductions and other experiences. Michael is a successful professional working in the information technology industry. He previously worked in the US Navy. He is of sound mind and body, is highly intelligent and healthy. He has never taken recreational drugs or alcohol. Before the first clearing session, one would have considered that he had led a perfectly normal life. The first clearing session was carried out because Michael had memories of seeing spaceships as a boy, and he wanted to determine whether these memories were real or a dream, or if there was something else entirely. In fact, the sessions uncovered a whole range of suppressed memories. Again, you've got to take this at face value, really. There's not a lot of corroborating evidence, but something struck me that this parts of this could be real. I mean, just imagine if somebody was involved in a secret space program and they had to be let go for whatever reason. Would you leave them with their memories? Would you tamper with their memories? I mean, I was listening today to Richard's latest interview with Gary Heseltine, and they were talking about Larry Warren, who was the security policeman who allegedly witnessed the landing at Rendlesham Air Force Base. And they seem to agree that he'd had false memories put into him to muddle up the Rendlesham case. And I think even Larry Warren would agree with that. So, they could well use this technique as part of the cover-up. And then just to mention this that came up more recently. Again, I'm not so sure about this because of some of the things that came out. This Captain K, Randy Kramer, he originally called himself Captain K, and then he revealed his real name, which is Randy Kramer. That was quite recently, in the last couple of months, I think. He revealed his real name. Michael Saller wrote on the 15th of April this year, a new whistleblower has come forward to claim that he spent almost 3 years serving in a secret space fleet run by a multinational organisation called the Earth Defence Force. In exclusive testimony released today on XO News TV, the whistleblower, who uses the pseudonym Captain K, said that the Earth Defence Force recruits personnel from the military services of different nations including China, Russia and the US. He claimed that he was recruited from a covert branch of the US Marine Corps called Special Section, after having served previously for 17 years on Mars, protecting 5 human colonies from indigenous Martian life forms. Captain K's testimony describes 3 different types of space fighters and 3 bombers, and he was trained to fly. Training took place on a secret moon base called the Lunar Operations Command. It took place on Saturn's moon Titan and in deep space. The space fighters and bombers have different propulsion systems ranging from fission and fusion nuclear energy, an electrogravitic system, temporal space drive and more traditional thruster systems. He also reveals the existence of at least 5 large cigar-shaped space carriers that are capable of interstellar flight that house the smaller fighters and bombers. He claims he served on one called the EDF SS Nautilus, which was up to 3/4 of a mile long. Now again, I'm pretty sceptical of a lot of these stories, and I wasn't happy with this because then he talked about for example, when he was on this moon base, there was a ceremony when he was finished his service, and Donald Rumsfeld was there, and I mean that's kind of one of the sorts of details that they try and put in, I think, to kind of give themselves some kind of credibility. And frankly, again, he hasn't got any pictures, video, he doesn't have any documents, I don't think, or at least if he has, I haven't seen them, to prove that he worked for the military. And I'm going to come back to this idea with the Edgar Fouché material shortly, probably in the second half. So, but that story was featured in the online Daily Mirror a few days after Richard and I did the programme about Edgar Fouché on Rich Planet, which I thought was quite interesting at the timing of that. So those stories don't normally get into things like the Daily Mirror. And perhaps a bit more weighty, I would say, as statements by Ronald Reagan and Ben Rich, the former head of Lockheed Skunk Works. Now, I only became familiar with this recently. President Ronald Reagan alluded to a highly classified space fleet in the June 11, 1985 entry in his diaries, where he revealed that our space shuttle capacity is such that we could orbit 300 people. So that is very interesting, because that was actually in Reagan's diary, and you can go and you can go and look at that on the archive. And Ben Rich has said that former head of Lockheed Skunk Works, they have the technology to take ET home. That was said after a dinner, 1993, an engineering conference in Los Angeles. We now have the technology to take ET home. That's what he allegedly said. I think there are a couple of witnesses to that. So for somebody like him to say that, the head of Lockheed Skunk Works, we know who he is, we know his record, that to me is a bit more compelling than these Captain K and all these other ones that I've mentioned in passing there. And I think going back to the moon base idea, I'm much more impressed with Carl Wolf's testimony, because he was effectively under oath. He would go under oath, that was the agreement, that he saw these pictures of a moon base in the 60s when he was servicing some equipment. And then there was the guy was basically sanctioned for disclosing this secret information to Carl Wolf. And that's in the Disclosure Project 2001 testimony. Not very long, but you can go and watch that. Okay, so maybe we'll do this and then have a break. Now, there is a less well-known, but not secret, or it was secret at the time, space program. So that's the next part. But this wasn't secret either, really. But I never even knew this. I mean, look at this. This is Vandenberg Air Force Base in the 1980s. They've got their own shuttle launch facility. Anybody know about that? Yeah. So I mean, a few people know of it, but they kept that pretty hush hush. You only thought that space shuttle lifted off from Cape Canaveral in Florida. No, they lifted off from Vandenberg Air Force Base as well. Apparently, that launch facility cost $5 billion, according to William Hamilton. I'm not exactly sure where it is. Does anybody else know where it is? Okay, it is California, is it? So it's West Coast, or towards the West Coast. Now, this was a secret space program. Again, I only became aware of this earlier this year when somebody sent me a link. I can't remember who sent me this, or heard of it somewhere. The USA manned orbiting laboratory, and the USSR had ALMAS. I've got a 7-minute clip about this. 2007 Nova PBS documentary tells us about the two secret US and USSR space programs named above. Both were designed to be manned spy satellites. That's essentially what they were, rather than just dumb cameras, which they had started sending up by then. The American MOL, or Manned Orbiting Laboratory, that was the cover name for it, never actually got off the ground. They never flew that, though it is true that astronauts were trained in secret, as you'll hear briefly here. The Russians had an equivalent program which was called ALMAS, which did get off the ground and had several successful missions. This was therefore a secret manned space program, albeit using conventional rockets, etc. Elements of this program are still classified.
This is what the Russians came up with. This is the spy station called ALMAS. 13 years in the making. The sole remaining capsule is locked away in a warehouse on the outskirts of Moscow. It is a closed facility, a place foreigners are still denied access. Nova's cameras were allowed inside, but only with a Russian camera crew. The ALMAS capsule was divided in 3 sections. One section was the crew quarters, a rudimentary bed, a table where cosmonauts could sit and prepare food, a tank to sip water from. Another section was mainly taken up with the sensors. Largest among them, the Agat camera, weighing more than 2 tons, with 6-meter mirrors folded inside. And in the middle, the operations module, where astrospies could zoom down to almost any point on Earth. To show them where they were, a simple globe that depicted their point in orbit, a screen they could look at that showed them a 100-kilometer panorama of the world below. In front of that screen, a viewfinder that could zoom in to 100 meters.
We could see details that were half a meter long from 250 kilometers in outer space. For example, we could see the make of the car, if it's a Ford or Toyota.
The entire station was gyroscopically controlled, designed to pivot as it passed over its target, so that when the shutter was triggered, the pictures wouldn't be blurred. And on the outside of the station, a first for manned spaceflight. A weapon, a 23-millimeter cannon that could fire on an enemy satellite that might be flying too close for comfort. In June 1974, all of this was loaded on top of a giant Proton rocket and rolled out to the Baikonur launch site. The Almaz capsule was covered with a shroud, so American reconnaissance satellites couldn't photograph it. Nine days later, Colonel Pavel Popovich and his flight engineer, Lieutenant Colonel Yuri Artukin, were launched into space to dock with the Almaz station. They were the first astrospies to orbit the Earth. Their mission lasted 15 days. Valery Romanov is a cosmonaut who trained on the Almaz program in the 1970s. Inside the command center, he demonstrates how Popovich's mission worked.
These are the synchronization levers. By pushing the button, we could switch on the camera. But the process itself went like this. Here is the panoramic screen where I can see the ground beneath the station. And this is how I zoom in. So, for example, I'm flying over the ocean and I spot a warship. I can see it's going a little bit to the right, so I can rotate the station a little to keep watching it and then film it. 1, 2, 3, and I have a picture.
So who'd heard in this room of that secret space program? Yeah, one person. I'd never heard of that until recently. So this was that on? Was it? Right. Yeah. Well, I mean, that documentary itself was 7 years old. I mean, you know, I don't watch much telly these days, but it was the same one, was it? Yeah. Yeah. I think a lot of them do get repeated over here. You can find that whole documentary on YouTube if you've got internet access. It is on the Nova website as well, but your region locked, so you can't, unless you use a proxy, you can't watch it. But if somebody has uploaded it onto YouTube. So there you go, secret space program. That is one. Okay. So I mentioned in this is another slide which has essentially come from the anti-gravity presentation that I did. We've heard stories by Bob Lazar. I think most people in this room will have heard of Bob Lazar's story. They're fairly well known. Stanton Friedman does not believe Lazar's claim. Boyd Bushman thinks that he was... Boyd Bushman, by the way, was the one of the research scientists at Lockheed Martin. He passed away about 6 months ago now. He was in his 80s. So sadly, Bushman, I think he was a good guy, is no longer with us. But Bushman thought that Lazar was actually putting out a cover story, which I think it was probably true. Because others have pointed out there are problems with the Lazar story. In a 1991 talk he gave, or it may have been 1994, I might have got the date of that wrong, at Little Alien, the one that's on the extraterrestrial highway, he could not remember the names of his college professors and gave incorrect names which didn't exist. And we're going to come to Edgar Fouché. And Edgar Fouché has pointed out other problems with the Lazar story, like his security pass didn't seem valid and this sort of thing that he'd scanned. And then we've got Mark McCandlish, who claims to know a witness called Brad Sorensen, who talked about the alien reproduction vehicle, testifies to knowledge of that. And then I think more compelling is what Edgar Fouché has talked about, which we're going to come on to. And Richard D. Hall has been covering this in his recent presentation. Now, Edgar Fouché, I think I've got a clip here. Again, Richard Hall played this in his presentation. He came onto the scene and disclosed significant information about black programs that he had become aware of. In a 90-minute information-packed presentation, he talked about secret aircraft such as the TR-3B. He also talked about his work in Area 51 on a TDY, which means temporary duty assignment. A number of things that he talked about in 1998, which of course is 16 years ago now, particularly quasicrystals, have now become more known about. Because quasicrystals were never really known about in that time. He has also publicised in a disclosure book he had written called, with Brad Steiger, called, Alien Rapture, The Chosen. And I've recently posted an unabridged version of this on the Amazon Kindle website, so you can get that. He gave me all the manuscript, and I converted it to Kindle for him, and he wanted me to put it on it's on for $4.50. And there isn't a paperback version. You can get an old paperback version, but it's out of print, so it's quite pricey if you want to get the paperback version. But the book was an attempt to disclose some of the information he had come to know, but it's disclosed in a fictional context. He got legal advice on this. Protect him and others. So, I think
the Aurora program is not a vehicle. The Aurora program is a code name for the ongoing project to research and develop advanced aerospace vehicles. And there have been a number of them, and we'll get to that. For the last few years, high-tech buffs have speculated at least one new and exotic aerospace vehicle existed, the SR-75. The first operational Aurora program vehicle went operational after 2 years of flight testing in 1989. The top secret SR-75 is a hypersonic strategic reconnaissance spy plane called the Penetrator. It is a mothership, which I'm getting into here. Hypersonic speeds, by the way, start at Mach 5. The SR-75 replaced the SR-71. Now this thing's been flying operational for 9 years. This is old technology. The new SR-75, I call it new because it's new to a lot of people, is capable of positioning anywhere in the world in less than 3 hours. It carries multispectral sensors such as optical, radar, infrared, and laser. The SR-75 far exceeded the classified military speed and altitude records of the old SR-71. The SR-75 has attained altitudes of over 120,000 feet and speeds exceeding Mach 5 or 5 times the speed of sound. That's over 3,300 miles per hour. From takeoff to landing, the 75 can make a round trip from central Nevada at the time to northeast Russia and back in under 3 hours. I suggest if you're hurried, don't take the Concorde. Can everybody read that in the back? It's 162 feet long and 98 feet wide. The belly stands 10 feet off the ground. I know, Gerald was 6 feet, but 2 methane and LOX fuel, high bypass turbo ramjet engines are housed under each wing. Now, I'm going to skip to the next slide because I'm running behind. So you have to buy the book to read what I skipped. The SR-75 and the daughter ship SR-74 were built by Lockheed Advanced Development Company, which everybody knows is Skunk Works. And the SR-74 daughter ship is called the Scramp. It's kind of cute, huh? But it stands for Scramjet and Rocket Propulsion. The Scramjet is a supersonic combustion ramjet. Gerald and one other source witnessed the first flight of the SR-75 with the SR-74 piggyback out of Area 51 before my friend Glenn Campbell moved in up there and scared them all off. Shh. It was sitting piggyback the SR-75. And he said, I guess it was back as early as 1975 that he knew that they were developing the SR-75, which is pretty incredible. I guess it took them 12 or 13 years to get this thing flying right. So it must be some pretty good technology. The SR-74 can't take off from the ground. It has to be on top of the SR-75 above 100,000 feet altitude. Then it can attain orbital altitudes. The Scramp launches ferret satellites for the National Security Agency that weigh 2,000 pounds or less and measure 6 feet by 5 feet. But as you can imagine, the old satellites that were big as a van. You can pretty much now make one about the size of a briefcase, so you don't need booster rockets. The NASA space shuttle, I'm here to tell you, is really an antique by comparison. The joke is on us. If you think these rumors are far-fetched, look at the YB-49 and the XB-70, flown in 1948 and 1964, respectively. Now look at the SR-75, which has been spotted numerous times. You say the government can't keep a secret? Boy, you're wrong. There's new rumors from my sources that two new vehicles have been placed in permanent orbit. One of these vehicles is the Space Orbital Nuclear Service Intercept Vehicle, SUNCIV. When you hear it from another reliable source in 10 years, you'll remember this. It's codenamed Locust. The SR-74 and the TR-3B Flying Triangle can deliver spares, replacement units, service fuels, chemicals, and modules to the SUNCIV, or Locust. The robotic SUNCIV uses deliverables to service, calibrate, repair, and replace parts on the newer NSA, CIA, and NRO Ferret satellites. And I know for a fact that they were developing a robotic repair of electronics equipment as far back as '81, because I worked a program to where they didn't want technicians looking at the equipment. Remember, I was in the forefront of automatic test equipment when they didn't even have a computer to automate anything with. Finally, I've saved the best for last, the operational model of the TR-3B. A friend of mine said he'd never forget the sight of the alien-looking TR-3B landing at Papoose, south of Groom. The pitch black triangular-shaped TR-3B is rarely mentioned, and then only in whispers. Next slide. The original TR-3B was 200 feet across, the prototype. It was codenamed Astra, and I was just informed by Jeff Rentz when I did his radio show that Astra has connections all the way back to the Indian flying vehicles several thousand years ago, which is interesting they codenamed it Astra. The tactical reconnaissance TR-3B first flight was in the early 90s. The triangular-shaped, nuclear-powered aerospace platform was developed under the top-secret Aurora program. By 1994, there were $3 billion-plus operational models. The operational model is 600 feet across. This flying triangle is not fiction. If you don't believe me, ask the tens of thousands of people who have now spotted one version or another of it, from Belgium to England. Ken can tell you about people that have seen it in England to Arizona. The TR-3B vehicle's outer coating is reactive to electrical radar stimulation and can change reflectiveness, radar absorptiveness, and color. The polymer skin, when used in conjunction with electronics countermeasures and ECCM, can make the vehicle look like a small aircraft, flying cylinder, or even trick radar receivers into falsely detecting a variety of aircraft, an aircraft in another location, multiple aircraft, or no aircraft at all. The circular plasma field accelerator ring, called the magnetic field disruptor, surrounds a rotatable crew compartment. It's far ahead of anything you've ever imagined as far as technology. Sandia and Livermore Laboratories developed a reverse engineered MFD, and I believe the government will go at any lengths to protect this technology. But you're not going to be able to build one of these from what I tell you, nor am I. So the government will go to any lengths. Believe me, the plasma in this accelerator is mercury-based. It's pressurized at 250,000 atmospheres at a temperature of 150 degrees Kelvin, superconductivity, and accelerated to 60,000 revolutions per minute to create a superconductive plasma with a resulting gravity energy. The MFD generates a magnetic vortex field which disrupts and neutralizes the effects of gravity on mass within proximity by 89%. Do not misunderstand. This is not anti-gravity. Anti-gravity you can use as a propulsive force. The mass of the circular accelerator and all the mass within the accelerator, such as the crew compartment, avionics, MFD systems, fuels, environmental systems, and nuclear reactor, are reduced by 89%. This causes the effect of making the aircraft extremely light and able to outperform any aircraft yet constructed, except of course those we didn't build. TR-3B is a high-altitude stealth reconnaissance platform with indefinite loiter time. Once you get it up there at speed, it doesn't take much propulsion to maintain altitude. With the vehicle's mass reduced by 89%, the vehicle can travel at Mach 9 vertically or horizontally. So for those that have had sightings of things making right, and they're not perfect right turns, obviously. Nothing can make a perfect right turn. It's against the laws of physics. But it sure looks like a right turn at a distance. For those that have seen it, that's how they do it. The TR-3B uses 3 multi-mode thrusters mounted on each corner of the triangular platform. I was going to go into liquid hydrogen, oxygen, rocket engines, and all that. Next slide, but I'm not going to have any time here. The multimode propulsion system can operate in the atmosphere with thrust provided by the nuclear reactor, and in the upper atmosphere with hydrogen propulsion, and in orbit with combined hydrogen and oxygen propulsion. The original picture of the TR-3B was taken with a digital camera that was carried on a Special Operations C-130 out of Hurlburt Field. It was flying mission support for the TR-3B. The current picture, by the way, that was developed with 3D Studio from that digital picture hangs in the black vault at Lockheed. That's all I can tell you about that.
So what you will notice about that was a very dense amount of detail. He was giving you all the technical details about what he knew. He wasn't making up stories about where he went and this and that. He was giving a lot of very specific information. So he also spoke, let's see, of, yeah, I'm probably going to go on to the next clip, but he spoke of going into some, he actually worked in Area 51 and he's got the documents to prove it. This is the other thing about Edgar Fouché. He has 900 documents. And he will give some of them, he's got a lot of them posted on the internet, not 900, he's got about 10, 15 or 20, which prove that he worked in Area 51. Now other people have tried to debunk him, and I've written a whole article about that. He states that he overheard conversations while working there about quasicrystals, as I said. Now this is actually it's a metamaterial, it's a materials technology, which was virtually unknown then. These are all the details that he described, the SR-71, and then he described the SONSIV, which was the Service Intercept Vehicle, and project name Locust. Those were all what he said, so I've transcribed some of those details, but he gave facts, figures, numbers, specific numbers, and these check out. There's no numbers there that are ridiculous.
Why has no one shot him?
Well, we'll come to that. There have been attempts. There have been attempts on his life. So yeah, he describes specifically how this thing works. It uses a mercury-based plasma. Might sound like jargon, but it's not actually jargon. This actually makes sense, and this is something that I'm indebted to Richard. I've stolen a slide from Richard's presentation here. And he said that he uses nuclear thermal propulsion. This was something that was mentioned in the 2004 briefings, which I haven't had time to show a clip of, by Tom Stafford. He mentioned nuclear thermal propulsion as a way of getting to Mars. So he didn't just make this thing up. This is real. Nuclear thermal propulsion is a real technology. So I'll expand on the detail on this slide a little bit. As I was saying to Elizabeth in the interval there, I put that anti-gravity presentation together in 2004, and there was another guy who goes by the name of Alien Scientist on the internet. His real name is Jeremy Riss. And he posted on his YouTube channel that he saw this presentation that I'd done, because I put it on the internet in about 2005, a year later after I'd made it. And he saw it and it inspired him to sort of look into all of this. And then he eventually got in touch, this Jeremy Riss guy, with Edgar Fouché. And Edgar Fouché made all these videos, and he posted on Jeremy Riss's internet forum lots of information about, he had about 1,000 or 2,000 posts on this forum. And then this alien scientist, Jeremy Riss, he attacked Ed and said that everything he said was a lie. I'm giving you the short version of this. But alien scientist Jeremy Riss had also attacked my friend Dr. Judy Wood over her research into 9/11. And so I was beginning to see a connection that this Jeremy Riss was basically a paid debunker to try and discredit the information not only about the TR-3B but also about 9/11. And what happened was Ed contacted me, I think it was like November or December last year, and we ended up doing about 5 hours of interviews, which I've got on a disc there and I've got it on my YouTube channel, where we go into a lot of detail about his history and his documents and how he came to be where he was. So I know pretty well how he ended up in Area 51. And I think that essentially everything that he says is true. But here I've got a clip of us discussing, it's not very good video quality because we did it over, it's not Skype, it's called Uvu, it's like Skype. But we discussed the work in 1979 when he was in Area 51.
I was outside the hangar thinking it was evening. It was a nice day. It was hot, but it's still fairly nice. And smoking a cigarette. And I had the goggles on, but they used to kind of make me a little bit dizzy because I couldn't wear my glasses with them.
Yeah.
So I got in the habit of kind of pull them down just a hair so I could just tilt my head forward and see over the top of them with my baseball cap on, my squadron hat.
Yeah.
And nobody seemed to notice that I could see over top of them. At that point, they recognized my face after being up there a few times, so I don't think they paid any notice to me. But I could see at the end of this long hangar on the tarmac or flight line, whatever you want to call it, there was this massive vehicle, and I could see the front tip and where just the hair where it ended, and you could see it was curved. It was almost like the flat end of the vehicle was parallel to the hangar, except from where I was standing, I could see about a third of it. And it was set up about 10 feet off the ground. It was several stories high, the body. And it was massive. I'm thinking about 30 feet. And, but you know, I mean, 757 is what the body of it's like 20 feet tall at least, or around that. Well, something triangular, you could store a massive amount of equipment on something that big.
So what went through your mind when you saw this thing?
Well, first of all, I was literally amazed. It had been as like if Captain Kirk had landed his ship on the ground. And it didn't make any sense to me how this thing could fly because, like I said, I couldn't see any discernible engines. There were ducts, ductwork, or variable vector vanes or something similar to that coming out the bottom that were noticeable. But I immediately thought back.
What color was it?
It was kind of, again, it was grayish black. Almost had in the bright sunlight, almost had a kind of a bluish undertone. But it was basically very dark gray, flat. I mean, it wasn't a shiny finish on it.
Right.
But I immediately thought back to the sighting that Jerry and I had on the Fairchild A-10 hangar at Edwards, and then, of course, when a number of us sighted it, this triangular-shaped vehicle in the desert on our motorcycle. So I was pretty much stunned, and I kept looking around me because I was afraid somebody was going to come up and club me on the head or something for gawking at this thing. Because obviously he was,
So that was interesting that, you did obviously make the connection probably within a few seconds, and as actually seeing this thing, you did already make the connection to what you'd seen, 2 and 3 years earlier and so on.
Well, I mean, if you think you see a triangular vehicle in the sky, and then a few years later you see a huge, massive triangular shadow in a vehicle above you scooting across, and then you see something sitting on the ground that has to be a triangle just by the angles of what you can see. I mean, it wasn't a usual shape of any type of known aerospace vehicle.
Wasn't it? I think you mentioned, in your presentation, this was on the third day you were at the Groom facility. You had to remove this, as you said, the direct orbital communications link, the DOSL system, and it was a module from a multi-bay piece of satellite communications equipment, and you had to inspect and service it. And this is when you found the circuit board that had this VLSI electronics, which is the very large scale integration electronics. And of course, this is 77, I think, we'd said this was, when you'd said this was in 1977. And you looked at this thing, 1977, and it was a 1 gigahertz processor on this board. And I was interested to hear in the other interview how you'd worked this out, because it didn't actually say 1 gigahertz on the board. You described in the other interview that there was a BNC connector on it. I know what a BNC connector is because I've used them once or twice. And you plugged in your equipment, and then you were able to measure the clock speed because of the waveform. Do you have a portable oscilloscope then that you were using, or?
Yes. I checked it with both of the oscilloscope and a frequency counter. But let me back up just a second here. What fascinated me at first is I'm thinking orbital communications link, and then I'm going like, okay, it's got to be just satellite communications. And of course, we didn't have a space shuttle back then. But the thing was modulated, the frequency, this very high frequency of the, I think it was like 800 megahertz to gigahertz, but the modulated frequency, well, that was the transmitted frequency, but the modulation of the transmitted signal was audio.
Oh.
Human voice audio.
Ah.
And I'm sitting there, I really just sat back and I'm looking at the schematics. I'm doing some test points here and there, and I'm going like, who the hell are they talking to up there?
Yeah. So it wasn't just telemetry then. Telemetry would be a much lower frequency, presumably, is that?
I got into the system. I got all the drawers, bay drawers pulled out. I got the covers off everything. Schematics spread everywhere. And I'm running some different tests and everything. And then it seemed like there was a relay and an EEPROM.
The EEPROM is where the control program is stored for that card.
Right. So it seemed to be in that area. And the first thing I did is I check out all the voltages, of course, troubleshooting, and then the different frequencies, and it would tell you what you should see at each test point. So I checked the clock frequency just to make sure that the CPU was performing at speed, and it was 1 gigahertz. And I'm going like, well, that's impossible. So I took the access panel off of what you would call nowadays a motherboard that had CPU in it, and the damn CPU was like this. It was huge. And there were like 2 or 3, it looked like smaller, very large scale integrated circuits on this board. And now you got to realize Apple was coming out with their Apple II Plus, which had a 1 megahertz, 1 million hertz clock frequency.
Yeah.
Around the same period.
Yeah.
Now this was a gigahertz, which is a billion hertz, which is 1,000 times faster.
More. Yeah. Yeah. You know, we didn't get a 1 gigahertz chip in the white world until 2000. I just checked this, and I think it was 1999 to year 2000 when the 1 gigahertz Pentium came out. You know, for use in our own PCs and that. So, you know, this was a difference of 23 years, wasn't it? Which sort of roughly ties up with this figure that people come out with, saying that, you know, military technology is 20 years or more ahead of.
Well, what most people don't realize, a lot of people don't realize that the government, especially classified programs, have technology that's 20 or 30 years ahead of what's commercially available. The National Security Agency, under the R branch, which is a research branch, owned their own factory where they designed and produced very large-scale integrated circuits and processors. I mean, they could build their own custom chips.
Yeah.
They were doing parallel processing 20 years before you could ever buy anything with parallel processing.
Right. So he was saying that he discovered this voice communication signal going up to space in 1979 from where he was in Area 51. So perhaps they were communicating with people that were in space then. So isn't that an indicator of a secret space program? I would say yes, it is. Now, everything I've checked out about Edgar Fouché has turned out to be true. I've no reason to believe he's making any of this up. Now, that clip from the documentary that I played near the start of the presentation from Channel 4, he was on that for a total of about 3 minutes. The people from Channel 4 interviewed him for about 6 hours, and he showed them all the document. But instead, they chose to just talk about lights in the sky for the most part of it. Now, what about this? This is something I got from Richard. What about this idea of using a magnetic field to generate, plasma to generate a magnetic field, which in turn could be used to create an anti-gravitational effect? Well, here's a paper, and this was from 2010, generating a magnetic field by rotating plasma. This is in Popular Science. And this I got from Richard. He kindly gave me this slide. Now, what he found was, if you look at the magnetic field strength, it's governed by, well, this is physics, it's not that Richard found this. Magnetic field strength is governed by charge, and that's Q, the number of electrons, and V, the speed of the electrons. So if you have a lot of electrons moving very quickly, then you get a very strong magnetic field. If you have a lot of electrons moving slowly, then you get a weak magnetic field. If you have few electrons moving very slowly, you'll get an even weaker magnetic field. In a 100-foot diameter circular plasma, where the plasma is rotated at 50,000 RPM, it can be calculated that the magnetic field would be 87 million times stronger than in a wire. 87 million times. Magnetic field strength would be thousands or millions of times bigger than anything produced elsewhere in the white world. And if you look at this as an idea, then metal plasma cooled to a temperature of about minus 100 degrees Kelvin would be a good way of generating a powerful magnetic field. So in other words, those details that Edgar Fouché gave out in 1998 check out in what we know about science in physics textbooks. They all check out. And Richard highlighted that this is a table of the strength of magnetic fields, and the strongest one that's been generated is inside the core. The one that's been generated is like I don't know, about 100 Tesla. Let's have a look. Where is it? Strongest pulsed magnetic field yet obtained non-destructively, which is 100.75 Tesla. But this magnetic field would be much, much stronger than this. But nobody in the white world has ever been able to generate a magnetic field that strong. So we don't know what the effects are. Now, though we perhaps assume that the TR-3B could fly in space, we don't have any evidence of this. We don't know if it can fly in space. Fouché said in his presentation it could, in orbit, it could use liquid hydrogen and oxygen propulsion. But what range would it have? Maybe it wouldn't be able to get to Mars, I don't know. But there seem to be various versions of this TR-3B. I've included a couple of stills, and we have some video in the earlier one. And there are many, many sightings of things similar to the TR3B. But I want to go through some of this as well as some of the disinformation because, for example, you'll get this. Flying triangle on the ground being serviced. Wow, what a picture that is, eh? And this was sent to me quite recently. And it's on this Ted Twitemeyer's. But that name immediately drew my attention because I know he's put out disinformation about 9/11. So within about 5 minutes, you've got a wonderful feature now. It's called Google Image Search. You can take an image, you can drop it into Google, you take the image file like this, and it will match similar images on the internet. You don't need keywords. It will actually break down the image and match it against an image database, which is what I used. And that's what I found.
Photoshop.
Yeah, definitely Photoshop, no question. All the figures are in the same position, you know, and everything. So it's just a Photoshop job. So somebody is deliberately putting out this information about the flying triangle. I don't know who. It took me about 5 minutes to find that, 10 minutes to find the exact image, and that's the link there at the bottom if anyone wanted to ever check it. Flying triangle from space. Wow, what a picture that is. That's on NASA's website. Looks pretty convincing, doesn't it? There's actually 2 shots from this selection I found. That's the second shot. Wow. But hang on a minute. Let's download the high resolution image, shall we? It's 100 megabytes. Let's zoom in a bit. Let's zoom in a bit more. And just one final time. That's the shuttle tile, piece of the insulation material that's come off. But yet you'll still see that posted on the internet as information about the flying triangle, you know, as an image of a flying triangle in space. You'll see it very, oh, this is proof, you know, that we've got a notice, isn't it? It's, unfortunately, for those that want to know more, it's a piece of shuttle tile. There's no question if you download the high-res image. Some people just don't bother to do that. I did download it. So I've just made a couple of little videos of flying triangles here, and of course we've got to mention that our esteemed member of the group here, or founder of the group here, Omar, because he's done a lot of research on the flying triangles, and he probably knows much more about that than me. And somebody's put your document on the internet, Omar, if you knew that. You can download it. There's a link at the bottom here. I know you can't read it, but you can download the PDF file. And the famous one, the Belgium case, 1989-1990. I was at the Exopolitics conference in Leeds with Anthony Beckett on Sunday. Richard Dolan mentioned this case, but he didn't mention Edgar Fouché. He didn't mention the TR3B. He didn't mention anything about this. We've got the Sheffield case in 1997, which Max Burns investigated. That wasn't a crash or anything, but a plane definitely crashed in the Peak District, and this was very near after the time that a flying triangle was seen in the area. And I've got Max's presentation. He's got that presentation now on the internet, so you can watch about that story if you want to find out about it. And that was a timeline of the sightings that Max put together, which I thought was very good. How he put all that together. It took him quite a while to investigate that. And then we've got basically, I've got 3 sightings here of triangles. There was one in the UK. I think this first one could be a fake. It sort of looks fake. I'm probably 50% the first one is a fake, but the next 2 do look quite a bit more unusual. And then we've got nighttime sightings. We've got a daytime one first, nighttime one, 28th of July 2012. And so I've put all the details there. So I think that it is very unusual. That is probably an Adobe After Effects, I would say, but I just put it in so that you've seen it. It probably wouldn't fly like that, I don't think. It's an unusual piece of film though, and it took me a while to find that version. It was put into the one of the daily papers, I think the Daily Mail. This was the nighttime one, which I think is a bit more interesting. I don't see that could be a regular aircraft, or that hasn't got the light in the centre. And there's quite a few of these if you look for them now. There's quite a number of YouTube videos showing these sorts of objects. Some of them are clearly fakes, but this one again I think is probably authentic. And there's a Cannock Chase one which I've shown before. I haven't put that in here, but that's an interesting video as well from 2003, which appears to be a triangular object.
What's the point of just appearing though over these irrelevant places like
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I don't really have a good answer to that. You know, again, is it just to sort of some kind of disclosure, but then they sort of just using it to manage the whole mystery of it all? You know, but I agree. Why not just completely keep it covered up? Why did they show themselves? You know, I don't know. And then this was a daylight one again. There's a couple of these as well. You can't see the triangle at first, but it becomes clearer. It could be 3 separate orbs, this, or it could be a triangle. But as I say, these are really just examples, because there are quite a few of these that have been filmed in the last sort of 10 years and more, as video cameras have become more commonplace in people's hands and stuff. So again, that's just some more examples of slightly more recent clips. Now, there was a 2014 History Channel documentary, and in that programme it was a very brief clip, and it mentions something called Solar Warden, which I hadn't heard of before. And I don't think Richard Boylan is a reliable source, but some of what he writes, you know, again, it does have some interesting details in it, whether this is true. He says, he writes on his website, since the late 1980s, the US has joined with a handful of other nations to create a secret international space fleet. Its program, codenamed Solar Warden, has now grown to 59 small disc-shaped scout ships and 9 cigar-shaped motherships, each longer than 2 football fields joined end to end. The Solar Warden space fleet is operated by Space and Naval Warfare Systems, Command's Space Operations Division, headquartered in Virginia seaboard. SNW's SCSO has approximately 300 personnel on Earth, and in space it operates as one part of the UN's Central Security Service. Because the space fleet has the job of being space policemen within our solar system, its program has been named Solar Warden. The Solar Warden space fleet vehicles were constructed by international aerospace black projects contractors, with contributions of parts and systems by the US, Canada, United Kingdom, Italy, Austria, Russia and Australia. Solar Warden Space Fleet's mandate is to keep space peaceful and free from misuse by any country, Earth country, trying to conduct warlike or illegal activities in space. Now, UK figure Darren Perks also claimed to have received information about this in 2011, but Perks is not a reliable source. So I thought I'd mention this because of the name, but I think this is probably just about all disinformation, particularly with the involvement of Perks here, which I won't go into, but he's definitely not a reliable source. It's just mentioned briefly in this clip, and this mentions the TR3B. That clip in 10 minutes, not once did it mention Edgar Fouché's name. It was, and the whole style of those documentaries now, there wasn't an image on the screen for more than about 5 seconds. The image on the screen changed about every 5 seconds. And then it went into all these rumours, and it mixed together a lot of stuff. They didn't speak to any witnesses. All the information was given by researchers. Not one witness was giving a direct testimony of it. Yeah, I'll just play perhaps a little bit of this. UFOs on night vision. I think there's something to this, because if these things are cloaked in daylight, or they're not around so much in daylight, or you can't see them in daylight, can you see them at night? Well, let's have a look, shall we? There is some audio on this, but it's sort of fairly inconsequential.
Yeah. And more. Look how crazy
It's October the
this guy
10th,
is.
2010.
Isn't this nuts?
In Philadelphia.
That is freaking nuts. Oh yeah, stop and then keep moving. Yeah, do some more other non-satellite tricks for us. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Oh, something else whizzing by. Hey, that's nice. Oh, little trick. Thank you for the little. Oh, another little trick. Oh, that's perfect. Thanks. Oh yeah, that's perfect. Oh, thank you. A little loop-de-loop there. Oh, and some more. Oh, geez, that one's a fast one. He's taking off and he's blinking too. Yeah. Hey, where'd Mr. Loop-de-Loop go? Shoot. My arm's killing me anyway. This thing is really heavy. Oh, another one. Isn't that nuts? Now, somebody needs to count these for me and post it on the comments. How many they counted on there? Because it's ridiculous. Absolutely ridiculous number of these guys. Crossing the sky. That one just is going in an arc. I had to move the camera in an arc to follow this guy. Wow. Yeah, he's doing like a full half circle arc motion. I just filmed him. He's heading down towards the ground again. And I bet there's some more. Oh, and there's another one. Look at this. I have a 5x magnification lens on it. With the regular one, you know. And this is a touchscreen HD cam. Oh, and another one. It's ridiculous. Ridiculous. Going over my roof again. Oh, and another one. Oh my god, this is... Whoa, look at that fast one. Whoa, he's fast. What do they call them, fast walkers or something? I forget the, what they say the government name is for that. And they leave the atmosphere or something, and they're gone. What the hell are they doing here? Look, another one. Why are they just flying around all the time? It's just really weird. I mean, if you're sightseeing, what could they be seeing flying so fast? And another one. That's the usual direction. Whoa! Whoa, that one's real fast. Shoot. Oh, that would have been a good one. Because he was nice and bright. Can only imagine who's in those. That is really cool.
This was filmed in 2008, Fremont, California, with third generation night vision goggles and a Sony IR UV modified camcorder. You watch it, what he picked up. I think these are genuine images. I don't think these are made up or photoshopped or whatever. I'm pretty confident these are real things that are being filmed. Quite fleeting. So I have no idea what that would be. But it's not too, probably not too far off the ground, you know, maybe in 30, 40, 50,000 feet, something like that. Maybe even lower. And finally Ed Grimsley's
Gorgeous.
This was filmed April 30th, 2011.
Oh, here's another one. Oh, he's stopping.
There is a dead pixel on the screen. This here is a dead pixel.
Look at the third one.
You can clearly see these objects are slowing down. They're changing direction.
No, it's not. It's stopped. Stop, please.
Hey, can we stop, please, buddy? Will you stop for us? And will you give us a flare and acknowledgement? I'm not moving the camera right now. Flare for us. Flare for us?
I saw them spin around.
So you can't see color with
That's
these.
a very regular.
So much color.
That's a very regular.
That's number two.
Oh, they split off.
So what are these things? What are we seeing here?
See all the time. Gathering and separating.
I mean, I think if they are using some type of cloaking or stealth technology, it's possible that they would show up more with night vision equipment. They're more likely to show up. Not many people have got such equipment. So those that do produce videos like this, you know, are going to be more prone to be called fakers or whatever, or just not be believed.
Without a doubt. This guy
guy's looking for a bathroom.
In space, nobody can hear you.
And you can see, this is very reminiscent of some of the objects you see on the NASA shuttle films that were captured by Martin Stubbs as well, if you've seen those films.
I got that one on tape, the one doing the turns.
Now, in the past I've shown these images, and I showed them at the beginning, I was coming on to this. There didn't seem to be any clear answers to what these shown, there still aren't really. But what I found is I did a little bit more research when I was preparing this, and I think this is actually, sadly, is another hoax, I think. The reason why is because I came across links between John Leonard Walton, who was the creator of these images, and James Casbolt, who's a well-known disinformation figure. He also goes under the name of Michael Prince. And he writes on an article on truthseeker.co.uk, I met a former military man called Simon Anderson at the end of 2007 in Chichester. He was responsible for taking the photographs of huge spacecraft, some of which were over 2 miles long and positioned in the outer atmosphere as we speak. He did this using advanced photography and telescopic equipment. He is definitely referring to John Leonard Walton, but by a different name. I also found that John Leonard Walton actually recorded an interview with Dr. John Mason, who used to be on Sky at Night with Patrick Moore. I actually saw John Mason a good few years ago, about 25 years ago, at a presentation when I used to live in near Coventry. And actually Walton had secretly recorded this interview with Mason, and then he edited it and posted it. And he was claiming that John Mason was validating what John Walton had said. But what John Mason actually wrote on a letter to the Jeff Rent's website was, since I did not know Mr. Mason was recording our conversation, he does not have my permission to show any video of me on any website, and the vast majority of my general comments to him, made in the interest of being helpful, seem to have been ignored or have been edited out. I must therefore respectively ask you to remove the video clip from your website. So in other words, if these images were genuine, then why did Walton, create this false impression using what Dr. John Mason has said? That is not a way to prove your video as being authentic. So I think that Walton made all of this up. Okay. He talks about the Astrolocus triangle ship. This is another whistleblower. He could be genuine, but again, he doesn't present any documents. But he says, you misunderstand. It's one of the world's power elite's biggest secrets. You truly do not understand the cooperation of the monolithic organisation of murderers that JFK Brigade spoke about, or how they have agents within every country and government of the world, and use smaller countries that have been held back and are purposefully underdeveloped to hide secrets and perform experiments hidden from the view of the majority of the world's population. I think that is correct. I think that's what they do. He gives a bit more information.
Hello again, and thank you for tuning in. This video is about a contract that I had when, actually it was before I started doing contracts. This is before I did my 6-year stint with AT&T as a special investigator. Before that, I was taking on a whole boatload of small contracts, maybe a week, 2 weeks long, sometimes a month at most. And one of those contracts was for a space weapons defense contractor, and I'm not going to say who it was, but I will say that they were attached to the Naval Space Warfare Department. Alright, so this video is about the Naval Space Warfare Department. People, you need to understand, the Navy has spaceships, the Army has spaceships, the Marines, okay, they're not really called spaceships. They're more like UFOs. Only we call them other things, like the Wing or the TR-3B Astrolocus. Okay, these ships have quasi-crystals on the outside. They employ a unique engine that allows them to have near anti-gravity qualities. They make absolutely zero sound. The quasi-crystals change color so they can match the color of the sky, so the ship can appear hidden above us. Some people have actually captured these ships in remote areas where they weren't engaging the quasi-crystals, because it does take enormous amount of power to cause the quasi-crystals to change color in order to match the environment around them. So sometimes they don't turn it on, and some people have actually captured these ships floating or hovering above forest areas. One video in particular captured a ship floating above the forest area, and then it engages what's basically a transporter beam. It looks like a white beam that shoots out of the front of the ship, and what that does is it literally converts solid matter into energy in a split second, and then that matter is reconverted into solid matter on the ship at the same time. So you only see the beam for a few milliseconds, and then the ship takes off at like Mach 6. And that's not impossible because of the technology that the ship uses. You can do more research on the TR-3B Astrolocust and the technology that it uses on other videos. But this video is particularly about the fact that our secret military, or the military-industrial complex, who are not answering to the government, who do not are not being controlled by the government. They're actually being controlled by private industry and basically the owners of the banks, the people who control the money. And there is something like, what is it, Star Trek up in space. They have spaceships, they have space stations, they have all this stuff going on up there. But if you remember Star Trek, you remember there was one episode where they show this alternate universe where Star Trek was more of a kill 'em all and ask no questions type Star Trek episode. That's sort of what the Naval Space Warfare Department is all about. And that's what our Military Space Weapons Defense contract is all about. We have unknowingly unleashed a bunch of morons, and in some cases clones, that are running a space program for the United States, for the planet. Most people don't even know they exist. I mean, most people are still driving around their cars. They have no idea the technology that's involved here. And the reason why we don't know, the reason why they're not telling people, is because they're controlling the planet using implant technology. They don't want you to know that their objective is to kill any race that comes here to try and help us to advance spiritually, and to show us how to use the technology for defensive purposes instead of offensive purposes. And so they're using this technology offensively. They are attacking any race that comes here to try and help us. And it's because it's basically an empire that has control of the planet right now. So anyways, just so that you know, there is a military space weapons defense program, and there is a naval space warfare department, and they are waging war in space against the good extraterrestrials that are trying to help us. And if you're not sure about what it is they're doing and why they're doing it, just ask yourself one question. Why don't you know about it? Why haven't you been told about it? Simple answer. Secrets are bad. If they're keeping it a secret from you, chances are they're doing things that you wouldn't approve of. So you should really think twice about what's possibly going on in space around our planet, and why it is we're involved, yet they don't want the public to know that we're involved. They're doing things they don't want you to know about. They're doing things you would not approve of if you were to find out. As a general public, you should start asking questions. Thank you for watching.
Okay, so finally, I've shown this clip before, but I'm going to show it again. Just a couple of minutes long. This was made by Peter Dunn. You can make it yourself with helioviewer.org. It's from the Soho Probe, which is the Solar and Heliospheric Observatory, which is 1 million miles from the Earth. that object appears to be moving very slowly relative to the SOHO probe. I think that object is in a stable orbit, and I put it to you that that is what you're actually seeing is a space platform, which you can't normally see, and it's been illuminated by the solar wind, and it's been picked up by the SOHO probe as just a single or a group of 4 pixels as it moves over that period. So with that, what are my conclusions? Well, the secret space program is still secret. I've only really been able to show you some brief, sort of fleeting glimpses of what might be a secret space program. The morsels of information that I've included here do not prove that there is a secret space program that exists. As is seemingly the case for the most part, those that know don't talk, and those that talk don't know. I think Edgar Fouché is something of an exception. He does definitely know stuff. Everything that he has said that I've been able to check out has checked out. However, even Ed Fouché does not claim knowledge of a secret space program, only of secret technology. He doesn't really claim that. I think the evidence here does suggest that there is a secret space program, and other factors such as the Apollo astronauts' connections and behaviour are also indicative of a massive deception involving runaway black budgets and decades of deep, dark secrets. If these people were proud of what they did and honest, they should tell us what they've done, right? If there really are all these wonderful things and they weren't keeping them secret for nefarious reasons, for bad reasons that were disadvantageous to us, they'd be proud of it and they would tell us. And I know that they've deceived us about other things, for example about 9/11, and I've got 2 books about that here tonight if you haven't heard me speak about that, and all that information is on my website. So there is a big deception going on, and I think it's something that we should be angry about, basically. We should care about it, because the reason why Edgar Fouché came out was because he felt they were keeping world-changing technology from us, you know, and that was the reason. So that's basically it. Those are some of the websites. Obviously, Richard Hall's website, disclosureproject.org, Presidential UFO. I've got links to all the websites that I've used in this presentation, but they're very sort of spread around and not all in one place. So I'll just close by saying thank you very much for listening, and I hope you've got something out of it. Thank you. And I will take questions if anybody wants to ask questions.
What happened to Edgar Fouché after you'd spoken?
Oh yes, sorry, I didn't really cover that. We did these interviews, and then soon after we'd done these interviews, this Jeremy Riss character and his friend David Hilton posted a video claiming that he was a liar. And what had happened was, Ed, you know, he makes no secret of it really. He likes to have a drink, you know, and he talks to people when he's drunk. And he was basically drunk, and they recorded this video of him secretly. He didn't know they were recording it of him drunk. And then they edited it down to where he said, oh, I'm putting out disinfo, and he was claiming to be a liar. That was the first thing that happened. Then they made a video trying to debunk some of his documents and claimed that he'd photoshopped them to put in a date or something. And Ed has replied to all of that. And then, just after that, he was involved in a car accident where he was nearly killed. But he's basically survived. He's a tough cookie. He's been DOA 3 times. He's been dead on arrival 3 times. But he's been resuscitated. So I think he does know stuff. There are other things I won't go into, but I think he definitely knows some very important information. And as I say, the MFD stuff, that seems to be valid in terms of generating magnetic field. Quasicrystals, Dan Shechtman was ridiculed for his study into quasicrystals in the 90s. Now, in 2011, he was awarded the Nobel Prize for Chemistry for research into quasicrystals. You know, so when you got that information that you can validate, and it really makes you sort of scratch your chin and think, yeah, there's something to this. Any other questions? Thank you.